The battle for Soledar in East Ukraine rages on, in what has been described as the bloodiest of the war so far.
Normal operations resume after a computer glitch grounded thousands of flights across the US on Wednesday. Investigations into Sunday's assault on the Brazilian government are ongoing, as authorities move to hold those responsible to account.
The head of Turkey's medical association is released from detention after being convicted of spreading terrorist propaganda. Smoke rises over the cities of Bakhmut and Soledar in East Ukraine, where the ongoing battle for control has been described as the bloodiest of the war so far. The fate of Soledar is still unclear, with Russian mercenary group Wagner claiming to control the gateway town, while the Kremlin cautioned against declaring victory prematurely. Kiev's border guard service has released images claiming to show Ukrainian forces stopping an advance of Ukrainian troops in the town. Soledar is important. If Russia prevails, it will aid its assault on the strategic Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, which Russia needs in its quest to capture all of the Donbass. For more than 5 months, constant Russian shelling has left the city of Bakhmut in ruins. Around 70,000 people used to live there. Now only about 10% of the population is left. Our task is surviving both the day and the night, explained this resident of Bakhmut. That's how I look at it. And of course it would be nice to be able to cook some food during the day. The city is still holding the ground, thank God. Bakhmut is a fortress. While it remains difficult to see which side is gaining the edge in the region, there is little doubt that there have been heavy losses on both sides.
Russian forces have not captured the entirety of Soledar, despite several false Russian claims that the city has fallen and that Bakhmut risks imminent encirclement, says the Institute for the Study of War. The think tank says Russian forces are up against concerted Ukrainian resistance around Bakhmut. Quote, the reality of block-by-block control of terrain in Soledar is obfuscated by the dynamic nature of urban combat, however, and Russian forces have largely struggled to make significant tactical gains in the Soledar area for months. The Institute for the Study of War has only observed visual confirmation of Wagner Group forces in central Soledar as of the 10th of January. The strategic importance of Soledar is debated, but its capture would be significant for two reasons. First, it would allow Russian forces to get closer to the regional city of Bakhmut. And second, Russia could use access to Soledar's deep city-like network of salt mine tunnels to penetrate Ukrainian-controlled territory. Now, the scale of the mines is vast, with around 200 kilometers of tunnels at a depth of up to 300 meters and big underground rooms or chambers, some of them large enough to stage football matches and symphony concerts. Now, the UK Defence Ministry says it believed Soledar was close to falling to Russia, but added that the Kremlin was, quote, unlikely to take Bakhmut immediately due to Ukraine's stable defense lines. The Institute for the Study of War adds that control of Soledar will not necessarily allow Russian forces to exert control over critical Ukrainian ground lines of communications into Bakhmut.
More flight delays in the US and beyond are expected over the coming days after a computer glitch in a safety system grounded thousands of flights on Wednesday. Although normal air traffic operations are slowly resuming, disruption will continue as airlines try to get planes in and out of crowded gates, and the rescheduling of staff working hours affect timetables. In total, nearly 10,000 flights within, into or out of the US were disrupted as authorities tried to restore the notice-to-air mission system, which alerts pilots of potential hazards along a flight route.
What I was told over the phone is that it's like a 9/11 situation with a full ground stop, And so when they said that, it immediately triggered something in my mind because I flew on the morning of 9/11. So my first thought was to get to the airport as quickly as possible.
President Biden has ordered the US Department of Transportation to conduct a full investigation after dismissing a cyber attack. The latest information says the outage was caused by damage to a database file.
Brazil's capital was turned into something of a crime scene following anti-government protests that culminated in the storming of official buildings last Sunday. Scientific police looked for evidence inside the country's Supreme Court, and several investigations are now ongoing into who's responsible for a day that shook this country to its core.
It was a very concrete attack. It was an act of vandalism, insanity. If you don't like the election results, like I didn't like the 2018 results, but I didn't go vandalizing things.
Supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro, who refused to acknowledge the election results, are largely believed to have been behind the scenes of chaos that unfolded in Brasilia. But some here are skeptical about what they say are lies spread by mainstream media.
Even with Lula in the government, the landless movement, as well as homeless people, used to do it. The indigenous demonstrators too. There have always been these demonstrations where they broke everything. And now they call this anti-democratic and terrorist. And so in the past they were also terrorists. Why didn't they call them that way? And at the time, nobody used to be jailed. Nobody was investigated.
This time, some 1,500 people have been detained, and many remain in police custody. Authorities have 5 days to charge them. Lula's supporters and members of the Workers' Party's former governments are adamant protesters sought to spread chaos and trigger a military intervention and represent the biggest threat to the country's democracy.
Democracy tolerates everything, except acts that seek to exterminate it. If we don't act with vigour against those who want to violate democracy, we will lose democracy. Those responsible must be put behind bars. Those who acted politically must lose their mandates. And apart from a civil responsibility perspective, they must pay with their own money the damage caused to the public patrimony.
It will take some time until Brazil's authorities and its people process what happened here, but they might not have that time, as more anti-government demonstrations have been called for this week. Annelise Borges in Brazil's capital, Brasilia, for Euronews.
Hundreds of supporters of the head of Turkey's medical association have welcomed her release from detention, despite being convicted of spreading terrorist propaganda. Dr. Şebnem Finçarci was arrested after calling for an independent investigation into claims that the Turkish military used banned chemical weapons against Kurdish militants in northern Iraq.
It's the responsibility of us doctors and those of us fighting for human rights to share whatever the truth is, what we've seen, and we should also remember that it's the media's responsibility to relay it to the public.
Finçarci is the latest activist to be convicted under Turkey's broad anti-terrorism laws. She was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in jail on Wednesday. However, people are rarely imprisoned in Turkey for jail sentences under 3 years. During her trial, she rejected accusations that she engaged in propaganda, arguing that she was just giving her opinion. The Turkish government strongly denies using chemical weapons against the PKK. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for a suicide bomb attack in Afghanistan. The blast occurred outside the country's foreign ministry in Kabul. It's thought the bomber had planned to enter the building but failed. At least 20 people were killed, although the Taliban has been accused of underreporting casualty figures. The Taliban claims to have improved security since returning to power in 2021, but there have since been dozens of bomb blasts and attacks, many claimed by Islamic State.